In the shadowy domain of cyber warfare, decisions to engage or disengage rarely make headlines. Yet, the United States' strategic pause on offensive cyber operations against Russian targets represents a significant inflection point in the evolution of great power competition in the digital age. This calculated restraint, occurring against the backdrop of heightened geopolitical tensions, carries profound implications for international relations, cybersecurity norms, and the future conduct of conflicts in cyberspace. The decision to pause, context and motivations. Escalation management in a nuclear shadow. The primary driver behind the U.S. decision to temporarily halt offensive cyber operations against Russia stems from escalation management concerns. Russia, possessing the world's largest nuclear arsenal, presents a unique strategic challenge. U.S. policymakers have consistently sought to maintain conflict below thresholds that might trigger unpredictable escalatory spirals, potentially leading to direct military confrontation. The risk calculus changes dramatically when dealing with nuclear powers, explains Dr. James Lewis, cybersecurity expert at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Cyber operations exist in a gray zone where miscalculation risks are particularly acute. The pause reflects a deliberate approach to maintain strategic stability with Russia during periods of heightened tension. Following incidents like election interference investigations, the SolarWinds breach attributed to Russian intelligence, or developments in the Ukraine conflict, U.S. policymakers have periodically reassessed the risk-reward equation of continued cyber operations. Diplomatic signaling and de-escalation opportunities. Beyond immediate risk management, the operational pause serves as a form of diplomatic signaling. By temporarily suspending offensive activities in cyberspace, the United States creates opportunities for de-escalation and potential dialogue on establishing guardrails for cyber operations. This approach aligns with a broader strategy of integrated deterrence, articulated by the Biden administration, which emphasizes coordinating military, diplomatic, informational, and economic measures to address national security challenges. A pause in cyber operations often accompanies diplomatic initiatives seeking to stabilize relations with Russia. The timing of these pauses frequently coincides with high-level diplomatic engagements, summit preparations, or negotiations on other security matters. By reducing activity in the cyber domain, the U.S. creates space for productive engagement while still maintaining its capabilities and the option to resume operations if diplomatic efforts fail. Intelligence collection recalibration. Another significant factor driving operational pauses is the need to reassess intelligence collection priorities and methods. The cyber domain is constantly evolving, with adversaries regularly improving their defensive capabilities and attribution techniques. Periodically suspending offensive operations allows U.S. Cyber Command and intelligence agencies to evaluate the effectiveness of their tools and techniques, address potential vulnerabilities in their own operations, and develop new approaches that minimize detection risks. There's a natural operational tempo to cyber activities, notes a former National Security Agency official speaking on condition of anonymity. Periods of reduced activity allow for retooling and reassessment. It's about maintaining long-term access and capability rather than constant engagement. This operational recalibration is particularly important when dealing with sophisticated adversaries like Russia, whose counter-cyber capabilities have grown increasingly advanced. Temporary pauses help prevent the compromise of valuable cyber tools and techniques that might otherwise be detected and neutralized if used continuously. The strategic calculus, advantages and disadvantages of the pause. Advantages of strategic restraint. The decision to pause offensive cyber operations against Russia carries several strategic advantages for U.S. national security interests. Preventing unintended escalation. By temporarily suspending offensive activities, the U.S. reduces the risk of miscalculation that could lead to broader conflict. Cyber operations exist in an ambiguous space where the line between espionage, disruption, and acts of war remains poorly defined. This ambiguity creates inherent escalation risks that a pause helps mitigate. Preserving capabilities for critical scenarios. Cyber tools and exploits have limited operational lifespans. Once deployed, there's a significant risk they will be detected, analyzed, and rendered ineffective through patching or countermeasures. By judiciously limiting their use to high-value situations, the U.S. preserves these capabilities for scenarios where they might deliver decisive advantages. Creating space for norm development. The cyber domain lacks the established norms and treaties that govern other areas of international competition. Periodic restraint demonstrates a commitment to responsible behavior in cyberspace and can encourage reciprocal limitations from adversaries. This pause potentially contributes to the gradual development of international norms regarding acceptable state behavior in cyberspace. Reducing domestic vulnerability. Offensive cyber operations often increase the risk of retaliatory actions. By temporarily reducing provocative activities, the US potentially lowers the immediate threat to its own critical infrastructure and private sector organizations, which have proven vulnerable to sophisticated Russian cyber operations in the past. Disadvantages and strategic cost. However, the pause in offensive cyber operations is not without significant costs and strategic disadvantages. Loss of deterrent effect. Continuous cyber pressure on adversaries serves as a form of active deterrence, demonstrating both capability and willingness to impose costs on malicious actors. A pause may be interpreted as weakness or indecision, potentially emboldening Russia to pursue more aggressive cyber campaigns against US interests. Surrendering the initiative. Cyber conflict is characterized by continuous competition for access, information, and positional advantage. Even temporary disengagement risks ceding valuable digital terrain to adversaries who remain persistently engaged. Regaining lost access and intelligence visibility often requires significantly more resources than maintaining existing operations. Intelligence collection gaps. Offensive cyber operations frequently provide unique intelligence insights that cannot be gathered through other collection methods. Pausing these activities potentially creates critical gaps in understanding Russian capabilities, intentions, and activities precisely when such intelligence might be most valuable. Stress on allied relationships. US cyber operations often occur within cooperative frameworks involving allies and partners. Unilateral pauses without adequate consultation can strain these relationships, particularly if allied nations perceive themselves as more vulnerable to Russian cyber activities during periods of US restraint. Implications for international relations and security. Reshaping great power competition in cyberspace. The US decision to periodically pause cyber operations against Russia represents a significant evolution in how great powers manage competition in the digital domain. This approach acknowledges the unique escalation risks of cyber conflict and suggests an emerging recognition that unlimited competition in cyberspace may not serve long-term strategic interests. This development potentially signals a shift toward a more managed form of cyber competition, where periods of intense activity alternate with strategic restraint. Such a model differs markedly from the continuous, unrestricted competition that has characterized much of the cyber domain's early history. We may be witnessing the early stages of a more mature approach to cyber conflict, suggests Dr. Erica Lonergan, cybersecurity scholar at Columbia University. Great powers are learning, sometimes painfully, that unrestricted cyber operations carry risks that may outweigh their benefits. This emerging pattern resembles how nuclear powers eventually developed tacit understandings and explicit agreements to manage nuclear competition after initially pursuing maximalist strategies. While cyberspace differs significantly from nuclear affairs, similar dynamics of strategic learning appear to be unfolding. Implications for international norms and governance. The US pause holds significant implications for the ongoing development of international norms regarding state behavior in cyberspace. By demonstrating restraint, the United States reinforces its public commitment to responsible state behavior while creating diplomatic space for norm-building initiatives. This approach aligns with US participation in the United Nations Group of Governmental Experts and open-ended working group processes, which seek to establish consensus on responsible state behavior in cyberspace. The periodic demonstration of restraint provides concrete examples of how such norms might operate in practice. However, the effectiveness of this approach depends significantly on whether Russia and other cyber powers perceive incentives to reciprocate with their own restraint. Without verifiable mutual limitations, unilateral pauses risk being exploited rather than reciprocated. The pause also highlights the continued absence of formal arms control mechanisms in cyberspace. Unlike other domains of strategic competition, cyber operations remain largely ungoverned by treaties or verification regimes. This governance gap creates persistent challenges for states attempting to manage cyber competition through informal measures alone. Economic and technological implications. Beyond immediate security considerations, the pause in offensive operations carries implications for the broader technological competition between the United States and Russia. By temporarily reducing operations, the US potentially provides a window for Russian cybersecurity systems to improve defenses and detect previously unknown vulnerabilities. This dynamic highlights the complex interplay between offensive and defensive technological development. Periods of reduced offensive activity may accelerate defensive innovation, potentially altering the offense-defense balance that has historically favored attackers in cyberspace. For the private sector, which often bears the brunt of nation-state cyber operations, the pause may provide a temporary reduction in threat levels. However, this benefit is likely offset by the reality that criminal cyber groups operating from Russia, some with tacit state approval, typically continue operations regardless of government-level restraint. Future trajectories and strategic considerations. The evolution of cyber deterrence. The periodic pause in offensive cyber operations signals an evolution in U.S. thinking about cyber deterrence. Rather than pursuing a strategy of continuous pressure, U.S. policymakers appear to be developing a more nuanced approach that combines capability demonstration with strategic restraint. This approach acknowledges the limitations of traditional deterrence concepts in cyberspace, where attribution remains challenging, capabilities are largely invisible until used, and the threshold for unacceptable actions remains poorly defined. Future cyber deterrence strategies will likely continue this evolution toward what some scholars term cumulative deterrence, building credibility through periodic, carefully calibrated responses rather than continuous engagement. This model better accommodates the unique characteristics of the cyber domain while managing escalation risks. Integration with broader national security strategy. The decision to pause cyber operations against Russia reflects a growing integration of cyber considerations into broader national security strategy. Rather than treating cyber as an isolated domain with its own logic, U.S. policymakers increasingly view it as one component of a comprehensive approach to managing great power competition. This integration trend will likely accelerate, with cyber operations increasingly coordinated with diplomatic initiatives, economic measures, and conventional military posturing. The challenge for policymakers will be maintaining this coordination across the organizational boundaries that still separate these instruments of national power. Technological wildcards and strategic surprises. Several emerging technological developments could fundamentally alter the strategic calculus underlying the decision to pause offensive cyber operations. Advances in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and automated vulnerability discovery may dramatically change the offense-defense balance in unpredictable ways. Particularly significant is the growing role of automated systems in cyber operations. As operations become increasingly autonomous, the human judgment that informed the decision to pause may become more difficult to implement, potentially creating new risks of unintended escalation. Similarly, the proliferation of sophisticated cyber capabilities to a wider range of state and non-state actors complicates strategic restraint. Even if major powers develop tacit understandings about limiting cyber operations, these norms may not constrain newly capable actors operating under different strategic calculations. Conclusion: managing competition in the fifth domain. The U.S. decision to periodically pause offensive cyber operations against Russia represents both a pragmatic response to immediate strategic challenges and a potential harbinger of a more mature approach to competition in cyberspace. This evolution reflects growing recognition that unlimited cyber conflict serves neither American interests nor broader international security. The implications of this strategic shift extend far beyond bilateral U.S.-Russia relations. They suggest an emerging model for how great powers might manage competition in the digital domain, combining capability development with strategic restraint, integrated diplomatic engagement, and gradual norm building. Yet significant challenges remain. The absence of formal verification mechanisms, the persistent attribution challenges in cyberspace, and the complex involvement of proxy and non-state actors all complicate efforts to establish stable patterns of competition. The effectiveness of periodic restraint in shaping Russian behavior remains uncertain, as does its impact on broader cyber norms. What seems clear, however, is that the era of unrestricted cyber competition is giving way to something more complex. The U.S. pause in offensive operations against Russia may eventually be seen as an important step in the difficult transition from unrestrained conflict toward managed competition in humanity's newest domain of great power rivalry. As technology continues to evolve and digital dependencies deepen, finding sustainable models for managing cyber competition between nuclear-armed states remains one of the central security challenges of our time. The strategic wisdom reflected in knowing when to act and when to exercise restraint may ultimately prove as important in cyberspace as it has in other domains of international conflict. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, we'd really appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up. It really helps support the channel. And if you'd like to see more content like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Your support means the world to us. Consider clicking on the videos linked in the corners if you want to watch more.